inclusivity. If you are looking for someone who can speak on this topic, I have the perfect person for you to be able to meet, explore, and learn about. I have this great conversation with this lady, and we talk about a number of topics, but inclusivity is one of them. And she travels all over and talks about it, and we can learn business best practices from her and the work that she's doing, and her legal background is fantastic. My name is Catherine Cantey. I'm an executive coach and a podcast host of Business Vitality. I love to be able to share business best practices. And what I would love to share with you today as a way just to continue to pay it forward, what we're learning, what we're talking about is share this conversation that I had with Kelly Charles Collins. She is the founder of HR Legally Speaking. So not only does she talk about tough conversations, she has a legal background to back it up, and she has a framework around this, teaching us like how do we navigate this? How do we create conversations? And what I've found in business is everything starts with a conversation. And she's written a number of books to be able to talk about it. And books are fantastic because it allows us to condense a whole lot of information and research into a short investment of time. And Kelly does a great job being able to do that. She's got nearly a half a dozen books out already. And not only do we talk about inclusivity, but we also talk about accountability and empowerment. She goes into talking about feeling valued, being seen, feeling heard. And these are all the things that are important to creating a solid culture and a great work environment today. And a lot of people are looking for ideas, they're looking for practical applications. And she is able to share stories and examples. And I love to be able to ask questions in regards to how are you learning and how are you just continuing to invest in yourself. And so we talk about all of this today. We talk about just all these topics to be able to figure out how do we just keep learning and supporting each other along the way. So if you're curious about, learning more about the work that I'm doing or to continue this conversation, you can learn more about me at catherinecantey.com. You can book a consult call if you're curious and you just kind of want to share some opportunities and you're not sure where to go. I'd be happy to listen. I'd be happy to connect you with Kelly. And I think the work she's doing is fantastic. And it looks like she's got a number of resources out there to support us all. And she even talked about her TED Talk. So that had an interesting twist that I didn't see coming. So we're going to share a little clip and of the conversation that I had with Kelly, and then we'll have the full Business Vitality podcast recording found on all the major platforms for podcasting, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Apple or Amazon, wherever you normally find your podcasts, have those out there. And we've got a couple years worth, so you'll be able to listen to those. And the reason I'm doing all this is to continue to pay it forward. I think I've had countless people pour into me, and I want to be able to continue to learn and share what I'm learning. And this is my way to do that. So here is our conversation with Kelly. Thanks so much for being here. Kelly Charles Collins, you are the founder and keynote speaker of HR Legally Speaking, found on the web at kellycharlescollins.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, Catherine, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
I love this, and I loved all your research. We started looking at your background and everything you're doing, and it is just a great opportunity to get to speak with you. And for those that are new to you, do you mind talking about the work that you're doing and your company?
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm the CEO of HR Legally Speaking, and also the CEO of another company called Speaker Moguls. But in HR Legally Speaking, the overarching theme is really around accountability and inclusivity. So when I work with corporations, I work with them to empower their teams and their leaders to create inclusive cultures and conversational cultures. It's my belief that every person and every voice matters. And so I'm always working to develop trainings and, develop resources and help people develop the skills to be able to converse with each other, to communicate effectively so that they can lead effectively, so that the place that we spend most of our time, which is the office, is not that dreaded space. Like we're like, oh, I got to go to that place on Monday, that it's some place that we really do want to be and that we can thrive.
I love that. And so you have a number of books that are
Yes.
out. You have a new one that's out, and I love the title about conversations. Talk
Yes.
about the book and maybe one of your favorite stories in that book, because I really think that at the core of everything, it's communication and it's conversation. So I would
Yes.
love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So the my newest book is called Convo Catalyst, and it's the humanistic guide to ignite dialogue, shift perspectives, and cultivate change. And it's more of a real practical guide more than like a storytelling. But you know what I've learned. So my background is that I am an employment law trial attorney. So I practiced law for 2 decades, for over 2 decades. And in the last 2 decades of my career, I worked with organizations, so small companies to billion-dollar global companies, representing them in state and federal courts. And I'm also a mediator and an arbitrator. So I have heard a lot and seen a lot in workplaces, and how conversations, the lack of conversation or miscommunication, really can impact a workplace. And it's not just the bottom line, because we think about the bottom line, but it also impacts people personally. And so when George Floyd was murdered, one of the things that, everybody wanted to start talking, like we had nothing else to do. We were home and we had nothing else to do. And companies started asking me to do these listening sessions. And we started talking about things that we've never spoken about in workplaces: race, racism. What I learned, though, most importantly from those conversations, is that people, in fact, wanted to have conversations. They wanted to have these deep types of conversations. They just didn't know how to have them. They were afraid that if they started this conversation, they were going to say something wrong. They were going to offend somebody. They were going to destroy a relationship. And so that was an impetus for me to say, like, step back and really give people the skills. So I developed what I call the perfect framework for courageous conversations, which is laid out in the book. So it's prepare, engage, reflect. And then now what I'm doing with organizations is helping them, giving them strategies to build conversational cultures, right? So we have our Converse framework that talks about how you can really develop the culture, because you need both. You need the culture that allows for these conversations, and then people need to know how to have the conversation. So both of those things need to be aligned. So the book really focuses on the practical, how do you actually have these conversations?
I think practical applications are just core in business, like the practicalities, like how do we get down to just easy stuff that we can implement. And I love the fact that you have a framework for it and you've created the space for people to have conversations that there really wasn't a space before. And what you reference, I remember being part of a group that would meet once a week on conference calls just to be able to talk about
Yeah.
inclus- inclusivity and racism, and like just trying to understand, because um, you're right, we don't always know how to talk, and we got to figure out how to just open up the door in a safe space to be able to move ahead and grow. So I have a huge amount of respect for what you're doing, and I think it's needed. And I love to hear that, and to hear that we can take something really complicated and create a framework and help each other figure out how to navigate this. I think
Yes.
is fantastic. Is that something that just comes naturally to you, to create a framework, to create the complicated and boil it down into practical applications? Talk about that if you don't
Yes.
mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm a lawyer, right? So, we like to make everything complicated, because the more complicated it is, the more work we have. But I've always had this knack for making really complex issues simple and just
Mhm.
down to earth. I learned that from working with my clients as an attorney, because what I found is that if I could get them to understand maybe the why, the how, like really just get
Mhm.
to the bottom line of things, instead of just, trying to overwhelm them with my brilliance in terms of, my legal brilliance, it made for a better partnership. And it made it easier for us to work together, for me to get the information that I needed, for me to communicate to them why things were so important and why you shouldn't be doing this, or why I need you to do this. And so I think when you are able to meet people where they are, but leverage what it is that you know. So even now, as a speaker and as a trainer inside of corporations, I'm always thinking as a lawyer that is just the filter. My filter is a legal filter, right? It's always risk management. That's the filter. But I also know that I could speak at a level of, with all the legalese, nobody will know what I'm talking about. And my goal is always to open people's hearts so that they can change their minds. So if I want to do that, I have to meet people where they are. So I have to, and it's not like people say, oh, dumbing down. It's not dumbing down. It is just really understanding what is the objective that I'm trying to reach and what is the best way that's going to get me there.
Do you have an example, maybe a story of how you were able to navigate that? Because I remember I spent 20 years in corporate, and I remember trying to navigate, and it's my fault for just not knowing, but I would see potential. I'm like, oh, we could do this. Like, this is awesome. Like, we're going to grow, da, 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 da. But then I realized I'm not meeting people where they are. And now I've like hindered the relationship because
Mhm.
I'm like super pumped, but we're not there yet as a team.
Yeah.
So do you have a story that you could share in regards to that?
Yeah, I'll share an example of like one of my clients.
Mhm.
So one of my clients, they were having some real issues in their organization, and so having to um, release some people, right, to
Mhm.
terminate some people. And so one of the things that obviously gets very expensive, right, for me to always be writing out releases and doing all the things. And for them, what I had to do with her is like really just talk to her and teach her inside of the release, like, why are these things in here? Why are we doing these things? Why is it important for you to ask these questions? Why do you need this type of information? As you're thinking about the person that you're going to be releasing, where is that person in the organization? Does that person have an employment contract? Is there benefits? Are there things? So really just educating about the pieces instead of saying, well, here, this is what you need to get them to sign, because I'm not going to be there when the person has to sign it. Right. And
Mhm.
it's not them. And it's not about, saying to them, like, you be the lawyer. It's about having them understand the pieces so that if somebody were to ask them a question, they could, answer like in a general fashion. I'm not giving you legal advice, but my understanding is this. And I remember one day, she sent me an email, and she had drafted the release, and she's like, Kelly, you've turned me into a lawyer, right? And she sent it to me. She was so excited because she, the person that she had to release, she was putting the information in there. Obviously, as a lawyer, I'm going to review it before it goes
Mhm.
out, but it gave her such autonomy, and she felt so empowered to be able to be a partner to me and to send that information to me. And obviously, it saved them time and money, but it also gave her a real sense of being in partnership with me to be able to do the work that she needed to do. And I think that's really the point of all this, right? Is that to really empower people to feel that they can do the things, to empower people to feel that we are in partnership, we are in this together. When we're in organizations, there is an overarching objective, right? There is a mission, there's a vision for the organization, and we should all be working towards that. But if we don't feel that we're valued, seen, heard, if people are talking over us, if people are like, well, yeah, you don't need to know what that is, right? Or, don't worry about
Mhm.
that. Such and such will take care of it. If part of my role is to understand that and you're not including me in it, then, that's a real that just causes friction in the workplace that's unnecessary. And so for me, I'm always trying to figure out, like, how do I empower people to do the things, even if they don't need to do them, but to understand why things are being done.
I think that's so important. And some of the best clients that I've worked with, they explain the why throughout the process. And then as they explain the why, other people understand. And I've seen it go through the culture. Like it started with one person and they explained the why. And then other people, they began to pick up on the modeling of this behavior. And it was fantastic. And I have to give a shout out to my legal partners that I've had in the past in corporate because I would work with vendors and I'd, go find a solution. And I began to realize I've got to bring them in earlier because they can help me with these contracts and I don't have to re explain everything. They can just tell me from the beginning,
Yeah.
hey, this is what we need to be look at. And I'll never forget, I met with one of our corporate attorneys and I said, all right, I have another contract for review. I haven't signed anything. I have another contract for review. what are like some of these key things that I can just go ahead and start looking at before I bring it to you so we can just speed this up because we had to build trust and
Yep.
we had to kind of build that relationship. And I just remember feeling empowered from the attorneys that I worked with in corporate because they said, here are just three things. If you can cover these three things, this will like bypass the first two meetings that we need to go to.
Yeah.
I'm like, fantastic. So
Yeah.
what you're doing, teaching the why, empowering people, that it works, and
Hmm.
it's so powerful. So I love that you talked about that, and you said something else, and I saw this on your site about feeling valued, being seen, being heard. I would love for you to be able to talk about that because I think there's this illusion that you see on social media, and that's not the same as being that authentic version and really feeling that value. And I would love to hear your perspective on. Thank you for listening to this conversation with Kelly. I really enjoyed just learning from her. I love her energy. She has great power and seems fearless, and I love that about her. So I'm super happy to be able to share that. If you want to listen to the entire podcast, it'll be available at the Business Vitality Podcast, found on Apple or Spotify, Amazon, your normal podcast outlets. And if you want to continue this conversation with me, you're curious about some of the work that we're doing, I'm an executive coach and a podcast host. We help leaders and businesses create measurable change using practical applications. 100% of my clients have been able to create measured success. You can learn more about me at catherinecantey.com, or you can schedule a complimentary call also on that website. And I look forward to continuing to share these learnings with you. And thank you so much for being here.